Welcome, everybody. Hello. It's another edition of the Hustling Sideways podcast. I'm Allen Halas. I'm a music writer.
And I'm Jim Love, and I'm a keynote and motivational speaker.
And this is episode 68.
68. We are inching closer and closer to another next mark of a decade.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a weirdly weird way to describe it.
Another 10. We're coming up on 7.
We're getting there. And it's been great. It's actually been a hot minute since we've been in this room together, which you all don't know that, but I would say at least 3 weeks since we've been.
3 weeks, a month, something like that. So I don't know. I'm in the middle of festival season.
Yes.
I know this is going to come out later.
Yeah.
But I have been in the middle of festivals. And so like time is just a blur.
And Allen basically ignores me is what he's trying to say during festival season. So I'm a bit of an afterthought, which I'm used to that. That's fine. I get ignored often.
I don't ignore you. I just have other things happen.
That's what they all say. Yes. But we're excited to be back. It's been so I know, what is this, October 6th right now?
Second,
6th.
I don't remember.
Happy early October, but for us in real time, it's like July 28th. So it's kind of a wild time. We're excited to get rolling. Actually, I'm sure as we speak, Marquette basketball is about to get started, which is fantastic. And
we should be drinking pumpkin spice lattes at this point.
Or pumpkin beer is what I prefer, but to each their own. But we're excited for that, and really thrilled to have an awesome guest here with us, and
with more Marquette ties.
More Marquette
and
ties.
You got the Marquette hat.
Yeah,
that,
we're just rolling with it.
You planned that today.
I did. I planned it. And actually, for those of you listening, we have our second live episode next week at Marquette.
Yeah.
With another guest. And it's really cool to speak it into the future. But it is October 6th right now. So we're good. And we're excited to be at the 707 Hub again next week for a live show. But until then, we have a guest who actually shares a commonality with both Allen and I, as he was our professor for at least one class that Allen didn't say any words in, but I overtalked, and here we are. So it worked out well. But yeah, we have Jeremy Fyke with us. Jeremy is a leader developer, college professor, an entrepreneur, all three of those things and many more. Jeremy, welcome to Hustling Sideways.
Welcome.
Awesome, guys. Thank y'all so much. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
You bet. Our pleasure. And you are calling us from just outside of Nashville, Tennessee.
That's right. Yes. And I still have, by the way, over my shoulder over here, I have my Marquette flag. I should have just got it so I could hold it up. I got a little flag. So I'm representing with you there.
There we go. We have a Marquette basketball hoop up in the corner over here too. That's not a frame for us.
Yeah.
So.
I love it.
Is we would make the joke that we should get sponsored by them, but we are. We're actually Marquette a sponsor. So it's great. We're excited.
Oh, that's awesome. Congrats. Yeah, that's cool. That's big.
A couple live shows on campus, and it'll be really fun. So we're excited.
Very cool. I love it.
Yeah. Until then, we have you here, and we have another person. I think the second person from Tennessee that we've had. If I'm not mistaken.
Second person from right outside of Nashville,
which
too.
is awesome. Yeah,
which great area, honestly. If have you been?
Yes, twice, and I love Nashville. It's a blast. Yeah,
I would move down there in a heartbeat.
I love it, and we'll hear more about that. So, Jeremy, tell us a little bit about you, about where you're from, your family, and where you're at now.
Yeah, for sure. So. I'm originally from Texas. I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth area. I was born in Fort Worth, lived in Texas for a good while. I always called Dallas-Fort Worth home, but I went to high school in San Antonio, actually. So if you're familiar with Texas at all, you just, there's a big range there, but just kind of all up and down I-35, lived in a couple different places. So about half of my early life in Dallas, half in between Austin and San Antonio. And so I lived in a couple different places there. And yeah, I went to school at Texas State for a bachelor's and then a master's after that, and then went on from there to Purdue and got a PhD at Purdue. And then at that point, best thing I've done is I met my wife there, and then her and I, we were married in my last year of getting my PhD. So from there, we went to Milwaukee, which is where I met you guys. And at that point, my parents were like, okay, they were still in Texas. And they're like, the only next place you can go is Canada. Are you ever going to come back down this way? And so we were up in Milwaukee for 5 years and had our first kid. And at that point, it was just starting to feel like maybe it was a good time to try to move back, down south more. We were used to, climate wise and other things. So man, we've been here. I've been in Nashville now 7 years, which is just totally crazy how fast time flies. And so we've been here 7 years and teach at Belmont. That's the full-time job. So I'm an associate professor in corporate communication, which, you guys know a lot about that. But basically, for anybody that doesn't, I always like to describe it as kind of a hybrid of communication and business, right? Which kind of makes sense with the title. But anyway, so yeah. And then I actually, by the time this airs, I won't direct a graduate program anymore because I've been a graduate director for for 3 years and phasing out of that role, just to be able to kind of settle back into teaching full time and, pursue some other things and that kind of thing. But yeah, man, outside of that, I own a couple businesses too. So I own and operate Jeremy Fyke Leader Development, which is basically a consulting, leadership development, and coaching company. So that's really, we specialize in training and development and really doing in-person workshops, some virtual, especially in the last few years. But that's really our bread and butter, is doing workshops like that. But then I also design curriculum and consult with companies, especially ones that are interested in trying to professionalize their training programs. And then I do some one-on-one executive coaching. Outside of that, another entrepreneurial venture is I own a hot sauce company. So my hot sauce company is called Two Heads Hot Sauce. And I've got some bottles on the shelf behind me. Maybe we can talk about that at some point. But yeah, that's the short version. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. That's been her aspiration really since we first met. And fortunately, we were able to make that happen. And so we've got 2 kids. One is actually not, will be 9 pretty soon. And then one, depending on when this airs, will be 6. So yeah, man, that's kind of that's a pretty short version of everything that's going on.
Love it. And with your 9-year-old daughter, it's so funny. Ellen and I were talking about, we used to be on an email distribution with Jeremy when we were graduating college 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was when she was born. I mean, that's just like wild to think of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
a throwback. But yeah, that time does fly. But a
Yeah.
lot to you got a lot going on, which is fantastic. And your life brought you to Belmont for 7 years now. Tell us a little bit about your experience there, teaching corporate comm, which was actually my major.
Yeah.
And it's a really good way to describe it, because I didn't want to major in business. So I chose communication, but had a sprinkle of business in it. But what's the experience been like there?
Yeah, really love it here. One of the things that attracted me to it, just from like a job standpoint, not to mention the area and the culture and everything here, but the job itself is, when I was at Marquette, I was teaching in corporate communication, which was in the College of Communication. And at Belmont, the corporate communication major is in the Department of Communication Studies. So a lot smaller, and it was within a school, within a college, right? So you have just layers of bureaucracy. But basically what that boils down to is they were wanting to take the corporate communication major, which had been around for like 4 years already, and just try to figure out, like, what are we doing with it? How is it different than business? How is it different from communication studies? Because at the time, it was literally like 1 or 2 classes differentiated the 2 majors. And they knew that I had, 5 years of experience teaching in corporate comm, and they were just kind of looking for somebody to take over, the not as like a department chair, so nothing officially, just more so help us give an identity. They knew I had some experience outside of academia doing training and consulting with businesses. So when it comes to, if you could sort of pick where you live, that was a huge part of it, was just that I'm going to be, happy, not only living in Nashville, but will I be happy in the role that I'm going to be leaving? Because I was a year from tenure when I left Marquette, and I had a really good gig and I loved it. So it's a little bit of a gamble, essentially starting over, but it was worth it. And I've loved every minute of it. I align strongly with the values of the university. And so that's always a really good thing. And so we can perhaps talk about that if it comes up, but yeah, there's a lot of good things. They take really good care of us at Belmont. So yeah, I love it.
Awesome. There we go. I love it. Yeah. Now tell us a little bit too about your business of consulting with businesses and things like that. When did that start? Did that start, right after college, or did that start closer to, being in Nashville?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the idea for it, and I'll just be honest, this was about the only thing I was really intentional about in grad school, because the rest of it was kind of like, let's just figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so, but when I was in, I think it was my first year of grad school, like second semester, first year of grad school, I took a training and development course, and I had a professor that was a full-time professor and did training and development, right? He basically walked us through, like, this is my full-time job, but I also do this on the side. And once I learned the process of training, and plus, he was open with us, he told us like about what he charges. And I'm like, I'm in, that's what I want to do, and just to be honest, that's really where it started, the idea for the business. And I remember telling people at the time, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, like with a PhD, but I said, okay, if you need to get a PhD to teach at the college level, which I had been doing a little bit as a grad student, I know what I want to do. I want to be a professor and own my own business. So that's kind of when it started. And then when I got to Marquette, I mean, I did some speaking engagements at Purdue and that kind of stuff, but like my first like paid training gig was probably my first year at Marquette. I remember a pharmacy. It was actually, I used to work in the pharmacy space in a former life, but basically like I did some training for pharmacists and they flew me out to California. That was Dana Point. I won't forget. It was like in February and it was nice to get out of Milwaukee
Yeah.
for a little bit. And my wife and I, they flew us out there and they were like, hey, we have this, here's our budget for 1 hour. Can we fly you out here? And we're like, yeah, let's do it. So that's where it started. And then from there, it was, you know, some people at Marquette would ask me, hey, would you come do a 1 hour training at Kohl's or Northwestern Mutual? Or, you know, there's such a great network up there, right? As you guys know. So that's kind of where it started. And then from there, I just built more of a client list and, you know, formed an LLC once I got to Tennessee and was set and that kind of stuff. And it's just been pretty crazy because a lot of my business just came from me reaching out to people. And then from there, it's just hard to like have a client for more than a couple of years if a client doesn't like go somewhere else, you know, and then a senior manager here moves over to a director at another company. And then guess what? They need training and they call me. So my client list has expanded with that networking and that relationship and that connection.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's cool that one kind of leads to the other. And it's kind of like the ideal situation is that if it's going too well, they don't need you. You know what I mean? But then
Yeah.
fortunately, somebody moves over, inevitably somebody shifts from one role to a different, and then you get called back up.
Yeah.
Reaching out to people, cold emails or cold calls or whatever, was that kind of the way to go? Or were you networking around and passing out business cards? I mean, obviously Marquette holds some weight in Milwaukee, but not in California. So how did those things kind of come about?
Yeah. Okay. That one was interesting. That was definitely a connection, but it was more personal. So my dad, who's retired now, but he's worked in the pharmacy industry forever. And so he was connected with a continuing education group. So, pharmacists and pharmacy technicians and anybody in that space, they have to do continuing education, just like a lot of people have to, in the medical field, 20 hours a year or whatever it is. And so I don't even remember how it started, but he connected me with this body, international, I forget now the association, but basically they were the accrediting body and they reached out and they just have conferences, all over. And that was in February. And then later that year, I went out to Florida and did one for the same group and then did some web-based stuff, which like back in 2012 was innovative to do a webinar, It felt that way anyway. And so that was kind of, that's how that started. And then the cold emailing and actually LinkedIn messaging is how some of this started here. Yeah, that was just kind of, it worked for me. I don't know how well it works for others, but there was something to it, that pitch, if you will, that at least got me in front of them. And then I could kind of went from there.
Yeah. And when did it become, sort of a formalized company? I know you're probably kind of doing this like, okay, one-off, because I was the same way. Like, I guess I'll just go to that one, and see how it goes. And when do you formalize it to be like, I have a thing that I should name after me and have a company?
Man, a lot of it. So there's a one important thing as far as the timing and how I built sort of the business up and everything. When I first got to Belmont, I was approached by the Center for Executive Education.
Mm-hmm.
So the Center for Executive Education is basically a consulting arm at Belmont. They've changed names now, but it used to be Center for Executive Ed. And they have clients, they have a big client list, and then they essentially hire facilitators, to kind of work as subcontractors. Mm-hmm. They approached me literally in the line at Starbucks. Isn't that crazy? I might have told you about that, Jim, when we talked on the phone a while back, but like my first month at Belmont, I had a book that got published. And it came out, just happened to be that I was on campus at Belmont. It came out, they did a big press release, and this woman like literally had my book in her hand. She's like, hey, this is you, right? Like on the cover. It was crazy. And I've been wanting to talk to you, right? This is like a month on the campus. I've been wanting to talk to you about, joining our team. And I'm like, who's your team? So it's kind of funny. But yeah, that's how it started. And at that time, I was also cold call, like my biggest corporate client is Dollar General Corporation, which is headquartered about 20 minutes from where I sit. And like that was a LinkedIn cold call. And so like while I was doing training for the Center for Executive Ed, I was also trying to build up my training business for my own stuff. The more clients I got, the more I was like, okay, let's get some, let's more formalize it, but also get some protection, right? So form the LLC and you kind of get some of the, just some, reduce some of the liability as well. So yeah, that's kind of where it started. It was, I had a vision for it early on, but the vision started becoming a reality when I started getting more business. And at that point I had to form the LLC, and then it allowed me to kind of say, okay, I not only do this, but I may come in and do a retreat for your company. And I may come in and do a 5-month consulting project, which I had been doing as well. So, yeah. And, that's where it started. I'm actually getting ready to do it again, probably here pretty soon, and rebrand as the business expands a little bit. So it's kind of being open to, where the needs of the market are, as you guys know, and then kind of letting the vision and the business shape around that. Right. Sometimes it goes the other way around. Right. But it's kind of, exactly. I have being that it's a hustle for me, a side hustle, I have the luxury of having a very good primary job, so I can be creative and, do what I want to with the other stuff.
Now, do you find so growing your primary career and this side hustle, are they harmonious? Is there times where you wish you could dedicate more time to one? Do you find conflicting? How do you, because I'm asking that because I think a lot of folks when you're really dedicated to your career, it's difficult to then, find the nighttime or how do you balance that time together with both? Because I know you're passionate about both of them. So where do you give your time, and do you see it building in harmony together with each other?
Man, I'm going to kind of try to explain this in the way that it's true, which is that it's a lot more art than science, right? So if you'll give me permission just to be messy with how I describe the way I do it, you have to have a balance between a pursuit, at least the way that I do it, pursuing the passion, but also doing what makes sense time-wise based on what pays, right? So you kind of have to, if you imagine sort of a basket of things, certain things just have to rise to the top at different times. Like, I'll be honest with you, building the hot sauce business has been the most fun, but the most challenging thing I've ever done. I mean, I can in probably a day lay out a 5-month coaching and training academy for a client, and it wouldn't even scratch the surface of how difficult it is to run a hot sauce business. So the hot sauce business is incredibly fun. It's very rewarding. It's a passion project that turned into a pretty legitimate thing. Doesn't pay as well as consulting with companies or as a professor, right? So you just have to at some point in sort of the business life cycle, if you will. And here we are in year 3 of the hot sauce business. First year, it was forget that, we're going all in. And then the second year, it was we're not going to do as many events this year. Third year, even less events. So you just have to kind of pick your spots if you want to look at it that way. And then, a lot of conversation, a lot of prayer, but a lot of conversation with my wife about where the time goes and where my energy is, and how am I showing up when I'm home to my family. And you just, it's, again, much more art than science, but those are some of the criteria that go into the decisions, right? Of how to make trade-offs. And man, I may sell $500 worth of hot sauce in 3 or 4 hours, but should I just stay home and rest instead? You know what I mean? So you kind of think through, it's as simple as that, and hard as that is that it's those trade-offs.
Yeah, exactly. I personally have gone through a similar thing of okay, my thing doesn't make a ton of money here, but it also requires a big time thing, going out to concerts, putting on events, whatever we're doing, right? So I've definitely felt that on a very personal level of you feel run down after doing a show every week for how many weeks?
Yeah.
And then you finally are okay, well, do I need to go out and cover this thing that's Friday night, it's happening, or should I just rest this one out? Sit this one out.
Totally. I find that it's funny. I'll be, let's say this has happened many times. I'll get a gig on a Saturday morning in Illinois, and I have to leave in Wisconsin at 5 a.m. to go. And I'm coming off a long week, and Will and I were talking before we started this, we're both tired today,
right.
Coming off of that and doing this thing. And I'm in the car and I'm is this, is this it? I'm so tired.
You're also built different, and you're running 100 miles an hour when you're on stage, or whatever.
But then I'm I have to find another gear. I have to get, and I have to step in, but I know that that's worth my time. When I'm done with it, I do feel more fulfilled, but I have those moments of is this where should be spending it? And because I leave a dog and a wife at home and who are restful in bed. Like I would love to stay there. Like that sounds great. I'd love to lay in bed for another hour, but I need to go and do my thing. And so it's a good point, Jeremy, because like you really have to do what's right for you, and it is an art, because I think it's super subjective. And I'm glad you acknowledge it is a messy answer, because it's not the same for everyone, and you have to find your groove in that. And if you don't find it, take a step back and recognize what's the most important priorities and dive in that way. But I've the same. I mean, I've had many moments. I'm like, is this where I should be? Should I be driving right now at 5 a.m. to go do this?
This is also our pitch for Red Bull and Starbucks and whoever to come sponsor us too.
Yes, that's right. I love it.
I'm curious about the hot sauce business and how that kind of originated. You said a passion project. I'm willing to bet that is not a product of living in Milwaukee at Marquette. I think that's more Dallas, Fort Worth, or Nashville. And when can we get some to put on some hot chicken?
There it is.
Yes. Okay. So it was definitely, always, as long as I can remember, I love spicy stuff. You're right. Growing up in Texas, it's like you eat spicy food and you play football. That's like what everybody does. Right. And so I've always had a thing for hot sauce. In fact, it's funny because in the last few years since we started the business, I've had so many friends that have known me for a long time. They're like, yeah, it's probably only a matter of time, when you have your own business like that. So yeah, it was definitely just, actually another kind of hobby. When I first moved to Nashville, I've always wanted to brew beer. It's always been an interest of mine. And I had a friend that we went down to Texas, and he had all of his beer brewing stuff. And he's like, hey, I don't want this anymore. Do you want it? So we took it all back. We drove back and took it home, and then started brewing beer. And then I met this buddy of mine who became a business partner at church. And people would get us confused because we look alike, right? If you see pictures of us on the website, we both have the same haircut, same beard, the whole thing. And so that's where the company started. It's called Two Heads, Two Bald Guys. And so, we started it in the kitchen, just playing around basically. And, he's a cook. He's just, kind of an amateur cook and chef, but just can cook anything, loves to tinker with stuff. And so he brought some hot sauce over, and he's like, hey, we're making beer now, but I want to try to make hot sauce. And I'm like, all right. So he made some, and it was really good. And I said, this is pretty good stuff, man. And so we just, basically at that point I said, hey, let's make a big batch and just see if people like it, and at that point, that's like where the 50-50 partnership started. Is he ordered the stuff, or went to Kroger at that point and got it. And then I ordered the bottles, and boom, we smoked all the peppers and made it. And that's September of 2020. And
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we're talking by Christmas, we had sold 400 bottles just to friends around without a website or anything.
Wow.
By the end of January, we had a manufacturing contract to produce it in a commercial kitchen at scale. So, we're talking within a few months, recipe to buying, 1,000 bottles from a manufacturer at a time to sell.
Yeah, that's unreal. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the answer to the other question is you guys can get some anytime. twoheadsheat.com.
I love it.
There we go.
This feels like a Shark Tank.
Right.
Tell me more about your revenue.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Wonderful here.
But too, that's also an entirely different world than what you had started in. You know what I mean? Doesn't line up with corporate communication. So that's why I'm interested in the thing that is always left field compared to the main job.
Random.
Or main whatever. Are there things that cross over? Is there any kind of, I'm sure you had to communicate to get that contract together and put together a pitch and a presentation and everything like that. So does anything kind of transfer over?
Man, that's been one of the best. It's funny. It feels like over the last 3 years, I've gotten a degree, but it's just one that happened through a business that I own, like an extra bit of experience. And I think what's cool about it, I tell my students this all the time. It's confirmed for me. A lot of everything that I teach, right? Really, it's legit. It works. I personally, I wouldn't teach it if I didn't believe in it anyway, but it's a whole different thing when you own and operate a business, right? And you run it. So it's given me a lot of experience to be able to say, hey, you see this framework here? This works. And then we've had some little, I say little, they thankfully only ended up being little, but I teach crisis communication, and we had a thing come up where we had a mislabeling that could have been bad. And people could have, anyway, it was kind of a messy situation waiting to happen, but we managed the issue. It didn't become a crisis. I mean, I literally went to the book, like to the book to write, to write the statement and those kind of things. So it absolutely comes into play. I've been interested in strategy and business development for a long time, which is really not a corporate communication thing, more of a business administration thing. But I've just learned so much about, sort of the visioning piece and, just little stuff that's not super sexy and fun, but, balance sheets and margins and markups and profits and all that. Like it's all that stuff, you do most of it, right? If early on, if not forever, if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's legit. I mean, I think that's what's cool is that the stuff that we talk about in the classroom it exists in the symbolic, right? We get to just talk about it. When you run it, it's material, right? And so you get both. And it turns out that the material experience tells you that what you just get to talk about in the classroom, it works. It is very helpful. It's just a different way to look at it.
Have you found like your worlds colliding? So when I say that, I'm thinking like, have you been at a consulting gig at a company and then someone comes up to you and asks you about hot sauce, or like have you had moments, like, and what is that like? I'm sure you just kind of like, do you have to go from one sort of character to another of like, oh, you're hot sauce, okay, yeah, let's talk about this, or or you're teaching and someone asks about your consultant, like what is that like? It's got to be kind of a cool thing when that pops up.
It happens a lot, actually. I was at Dollar General back in, I think, April for a big workshop that I've been doing now for like 6 years. I do it every basically twice a year. And this guy was like, man, when she introduced you, she mentioned Two Heads. I knew I recognized you from somewhere. And it was somebody who bought something from us at an event one time, and then I actually took a bottle to the organizer that like hired me for the event. I took her one of ours and it was sitting on the table and he's like, I knew I recognized that, so that stuff happens a lot. I'll tell you what happens a lot, which is really kind of awkward, but I sometimes forget like where I recognize people, the more like spheres and platforms you operate in, that happens. So like we were at church, actually, we went and visited a new church on Sunday. And there was this guy that was playing the keyboard. And I told my wife, I was like, man, that guy looks so familiar. I think he works for, Cat Financial. I just listed a couple of clients that I've worked with recently. So I went up to him after worship, and he was like doing something at the back. And I asked him, hey, where do you work? It was a weird, awkward, like, hello. But I was just like, I got to know. And so it turns out it was not from that at all. It was from another church that we used to go to. Right.
Oh,
so stuff like that happens where I'm like, okay, in what sphere of influence does this person intersect with me? So totally. But it is fun. It's cool. And here, I'll give you one other example for that. I was doing a workshop at BMI, which Alan, you may know, but that's the big music licensing company. Yes. So BMI is a client of mine. And I was doing a workshop there last year, and I was doing a workshop for the licensing department. And I think I did like 2 or 3 in a day. It was just like a full day, but different workshops. And so I was doing a workshop for licensing people, and we had just released, I think, like our second licensed hot sauce. So that was one of those things that was cool because it gave me a lot of credibility with that audience, because hot sauce versus music, not the same, but at least the process of licensing, royalties, all that stuff was similar language. So that'd be an example where the businesses come together in ways that are very fruitful.
Yeah. And I would assume too that, working in Nashville, that you're going to come across some country stars. Maybe you get some celebrity endorsements out of this thing.
It's funny because we've got, being at Belmont, like there's a lot of musicians that teach, and there's a lot of like entertainment industry lawyers that teach. And I was leading a workshop at Belmont, and a guy that was he was in the band Little Texas, which was a pretty well-known, country band. So he and I started talking, and he's like, you never thought about doing a licensed hot sauce, like do a Luke Combs, licensed hot sauce or whoever. And I'm like, that'd be awesome. So we've been talking about that. Nothing's gotten off the ground, but it's like all these artists now have their own whiskey, and they have all this stuff. And I'm like, why not do a hot sauce? So maybe someday.
Yeah. I think it'd be a perfect fit.
I could just see someone pulling. Yeah, like I'd do 2 head hot sauce.
And we'll be like, we know that guy, and they'll be like, the country singer. I'll be like, no, the guy from the hot sauce.
The hot sauce.
We know that guy instead.
So. The guy whose picture is on the label, like this big on the bottle.
That's the one. We know the little head guy.
What because I'm assuming that the hot sauce is also a passion project on the side of it. What is the most fulfilling bit of doing all of these side hustles, side jobs, and making it all work together?
it's really about, it's about impact, and I want to be able to use any platform that I'm given, that and we can get into this more in depth if it's appropriate, if you guys want to, but my foundation is God has blessed me with a lot of different platforms to be able to reach people. What I choose to do with that, I think, is an important responsibility. So I can, like my business partner and I are both Christians, and we do our best to tithe 10% of everything we make to, in this case, nonprofits or faith-based organizations or whatever it is.
Sure.
The training business, teaching, all those things. When I say make an impact, I love being able, the main reason I want to pursue extra income is so I can help people, right? If we're at a restaurant and we feel like the waitress, is in need, it's a single mom or somebody that's pregnant or whatever, I love being able to give a big tip. I'll just be honest with you. Like, those are the kind of things right there. And then, of course, like, we're able to do things as a family that we want to, but those are, that's so rewarding. It truly is, right? It kind of sounds cliche or boilerplate, but the ability to make an impact. The other thing outside of that, give back piece is, when I got my PhD, I said, I never wanted to be like, and this is going to sound bad, I don't mean to say this in a way that puts light on anybody in a bad way. I didn't want to be just a professor, right? I wanted to be able to teach, but then also use the communication skills that I got a PhD in, right? The perspectives, the theories, the knowledge to help other people. And that's the biggest thing is, when I teach somebody something, I truly believe that it will help them if they'll put it into practice.
Yeah.
And so that's super rewarding just from a content standpoint.
Yeah. And we could say, like, impact wise, you were our professor 10 years ago, and we both remember the class and remember lesson. Remember you taking us out for drinks at Solomons on our last day. Like, that's the kind of stuff that sticks with you. It did. It was great. You bought everyone around a beer, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. And man, that's funny too. Cause like going to Belmont where it's dry and there's nothing like that. It's like, oh yeah, there was a bar on campus. Wasn't there?
Some administrator at Belmont's like, wait, he bought this guy. It did not.
He did what?
Yeah. No, we're good.
It was great, but we could always tell that you had a passion for what you were doing, and beyond just that classroom, like you were excited, motivated by something that was different, and that sticks with people. And and that's impact too, beyond just the way that you approach your work, I think, is the important piece. And you can, not everyone has to have experience, but you can make up for it with passion and enthusiasm. That's what I think, when people can do that.
To that point too, when you see somebody that, like you said, has got a passion for it, has got a thing, that's also memorable to that person. I can't tell you half of the digital media professors that I had.
Right.
I can remember Jeremy because I remember the name, and I remember that, obviously he put in the work on it. Can't tell you who taught me a lot of my other comm studies classes.
Right.
To be very honest with you.
Yeah.
So, that's a product of being passionate, and that comes through, even if it's not communicated verbally or really outright. People see it and people notice that.
That's cool.
So
yeah, man, I appreciate that, guys. It really is. It's a lot of fun. I just feel like there's just a lot of jobs that are meaningful, and being a professor, there's parts of it that are a little bit of a grind, although personally I think it's a lot easier than some people make it sound. But it's fun. You get to make an impact. It's like you look at all the the list of things that make work meaningful. It's like check all the way down the line, and it's a good life, man. It really is. So yeah, I love being able to do that, and hearing students what they're doing next and where they go next and helping them get jobs and stuff is just awesome, man. Like, it's a lot. There's just a lot of benefits and hardly any downsides, to be honest with you.
No, that's great. And so when you're thinking, between your leadership development company, the two heads, what's next? What do you feel like are you going to continue on sort of the route that you're on now? Do you have a specific goal for either of the companies you're running? Where's your head at for the future?
Yeah. I don't plan, and I say I don't plan, and I say that because you never know, right? God might just say, well, it doesn't really matter what you want to do, right? And so it's sort of one of those things, but I'm always open to that as far as where God would have me go next. But Belmont, I think I'm a lifer. At this point, I've got tenure a couple years ago, and so I plan on sticking with that. That's pretty good gig. And then I love, there's always an opportunity when you get tenure to do anything you'd like in the university, right? Move up and do administration, all those things. And it may happen someday. I don't really know, but right now I'm really happy. And I've learned that there's a difference between being in a groove and being in a rut,
Sure.
and I feel like I'm in a groove and I want to stay there. So I'm going to do that indefinitely. With the training business, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I'm working on some expansion and rebranding things as I get more, just kind of diversifying, right? I've got some ideas with internal podcasts for businesses and talking to some people about that. And I've got, the coaching business that grows and that kind of stuff. And I want to be able to do that but I don't want to, I can't have that impact the teaching, which is my full-time job. So kind of those things can kind of, when you own a business on the side, it can only grow the extent to which you have the capacity to let it help it grow. Right.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Two Heads kind of in a weird, like we've continued to scale back on the number of things that we're doing in terms of like revenue centers. And so, man, that's kind of getting a little bit of a backseat intentionally right now, where the goal there is fewer events, bigger, like, license contracts. We just had a company that ordered like 2,500 bottles of one of our items. We want more of those, right? So that kind of stuff. And so that, I would say that's probably the one that's the least set in stone right now, because you just don't know. I mean, we know my business partner and I both have a lot going on, both work full time, and we just kind of know what the potential the business has for the capacity we can give it.
Yeah. And that really is that's success when it comes to a side business, is knowing that comfort of like, I can do this when I need to, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't need, like, not everything is relying on this one stream of revenue, this one thing. There's always that flexibility of like, this is also here, but it can also be on the side if it needs to be on the side, or tucked away for a little bit if it needs to be tucked away.
Something can be in the back burner for a bit, and that's totally appropriate. And you gotta make your priorities that way. So I like that a lot. And so Jeremy, if people want to get in touch with you, if people want to talk about your consulting, they want to buy some hot sauce, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So my main website is just jeremyfyke.com. So that's the main, and I've got, a little bit about clients I've worked with and testimonials and all that good stuff. And, they can reach out to me that way. And then I'm actually pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm on there a lot, and people reach out to me and find me there. And I'm always out there. Like when I do workshops, I take a selfie with the group and post and that kind of stuff. And so anywhere in there. And then, our website for the hot sauce company is just twoheadsheat.com. Usually we pop up too. If you just Google Two Heads Hot Sauce, we'll pop up, thankfully. And then of course, Facebook, Instagram, we're on there as well. So I'm around for sure. So
there we go. And now the $1 million question.
Yes.
It is March, and is the first round of the March Madness tournament, and the Belmont Bruins have drawn the Marquette Golden Eagles.
Who you got?
Who are you taking in that one?
Man, to be honest with you, I would probably, if I was doing a bracket, I would probably pick Marquette. I think I would.
There we go.
A good answer.
There we go.
Correct answer. I will say these two teams did play each other in 2015 in Belmont. So that was a tough game.
And I remember that too, because I'm trying to think, when would that? Yeah, because at that point I was already on my way. Like I knew, because it would have been in the spring, winter, whatever it was.
Winter of 15. Yep.
And I remember one of my students or whatever, and I may have been at that point before I told everybody that I was leaving, but I remember somebody saying, "How did we lose to Belmont? They're a music school."
And a communication school.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, but it is funny. I know it's cool, because I've always been, Purdue is pretty good at a bunch of different things, but like I love the two basketball schools, right? Marquette and now Belmont. It's just fun. I mean, Belmont's obviously smaller, that kind of thing, but it's still, they're competitive, right? And they're fun games and everything. So I've been blessed with some good sports to watch.
All you can ask for, man. That's when it comes down to it. That's the main takeaway. Pick your sports teams appropriately.
Yeah. And we also, our first licensed hot sauce was our Belmont hot sauce.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sweet.
So the worlds collide again too.
Yeah, quite literally.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, and we've got like we do some of these kind of things. Like we make a barbecue sauce for Belmont.
Oh,
awesome.
Whoa.
I love the
There we
label
go.
too. That's super cool.
Yeah. So it's my wife designs most of the labels, so I have to show off, and then we do a sauce for Austin Peay State University as well, Stashville Sting.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
That's sweet.
That is awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing
Yes,
this.
thank
Thanks
you.
for being part of the show. And
Betcha.
you guys are watching for the first time or listening for the first time. Hello, welcome. If it's the 68th time or even more than that with the bonus episodes, thanks for staying with
Glad
us.
they're still here.
Yeah, exactly. We are the Hustling Sideways podcast. You can find us everywhere that you get your podcasts. We're also on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on, I almost said LinkedIn. We kind of
We're out there.
Kinda.
We exist.
we're also on YouTube. We're on TikTok. We're on Threads. We're all over the place. Hustling Sideways everywhere.
Hard to miss, frankly.
Yes, it's us. We're much like two heads. We pop up. These pop up. If you want to be a guest on the show, it's very simple. Drop us a line over at hustlingsideways@gmail.com. And Jim,
Keep on hustling.
see you next week.